He's the Cockney who conquered Hollywood. The pale, skinny kid who became a 60s heartthrob. The double Oscar winner who'd happily admit he's made some duds. He's been such a key figure in British cinema that really there's not a lot that people don't know about Michael Caine. Born Maurice Micklewhite in South London, Caine spent years as a struggling actor playing small parts before a standout performance in the 1964 film Zulu won him rave notices. His next two roles were iconic in The Ipcress File and Alfie, and they helped turn him into a true Oscar-nominated international star. In 1969, he was out and about promoting what would become one of his most popular films, The Italian Job, which led to his first interview on the BBC on a programme called The Movies.
I was looking at the What's On one night, and I just wanted to go and see a fun film and not worry about anything, not to be preached at, not to have to use my brain at all. I was just tired. I just wanted to sit back and be entertained. And the whole idea of making the film sprang from that, in as much as I just wanted to make a big fun film. I didn't, as a star would normally do, who sets up a picture, which is what I did, is I set up the script, I got the $3 million to make it and everything. I didn't do it in order to push myself over on the public. I wanted to have the biggest car chase. I wanted the car chase to be the star of the thing. I wanted to have Noel Coward in it. I wanted it to be really more or less the way it is, because one would always want it to be better than the way it is. But it turned out to be a fun picture which gives a tremendous amount of entertainment to a lot of people, and it's very successful on that level. I never at any time tried to get the Academy Award with it or do anything else with it except to have a laugh and a bit of fun, that's all, of which it struck me there was very little about. It's also a film, something which I liked about it is films are full of violence against people, and always have been, actually. I was just about to say nowadays, but they've always have been. Gore Vidal once called it the pornography of death. And I just thought, for a change, instead of all these machines killing people, it might be a change just for fun to have all these people killing machines. And I dislike cars intensely, and if you go and see the picture, you'll see it coming out, because we destroy cars left, right and centre, which also brings about its own type of violence, in as much as if you see an actor killed or tortured or beaten up on the screen, the effect is there for a moment that that's happening to him, but you do know that they haven't actually done this to him. But if you destroy objects, the audience can actually see that you really are destroying a Lamborghini Miura and an Aston Martin and 5 E-types and I think 15 Minis we had to we destroyed every make of car you can possibly think, and in very spectacular ways.
I could eat a horse.
A hero is just anybody who does something heroic. What I was just anybody who didn't even bother to do anything heroic and was just against the normal type of screen hero that one saw. As a young man sitting there with glasses, very thin, rather pimply, I used to watch the screen, and all the men were so big and broad and suntanned and handsome that they were actually insulting the people they were aimed at, which was namely me. And I like to think of myself as complimenting the people I'm aimed at.
Once he'd reached the top, Caine worked hard to stay there. The early 70s saw more critical acclaim with films like The Man Who Would Be King, Get Carter, and Sleuth, directed by Joseph Mankiewicz and co-starring Laurence Olivier.
The plot of Sleuth is so intricate that there's not really very much you can say. The main thing that I find extremely interesting, apart from things that I can't say, which is the majority of the picture, is the something that is not necessarily dear to my heart, but the class thing, which is close to my heart, if not dear. There is a tremendous class battle which goes on the entire time during the sort of mental struggles between Andrew Wyke and the character that I play. And I find this extremely interesting, not just from the old what about the workers point of view, but the tremendous difference in frames of mind.
I understand you want to marry my wife. Forgive me raising the matter, but as Marguerite is away for a few days in the north visiting relatives, I thought this might be an appropriate moment for you and me to have a little chat.
I see.
Well, is it true?
Yes. With your permission, of course.
Why not? You seem to be a personable enough young man, nicely spoken, neatly dressed in brand new country gentleman's clothing. I'm sure you won't mind me asking you a few questions about your background, parents and so forth.
My mother was born in Hereford, a farmer's daughter, and my father is an Italian who came to this country in the 30s from Genoa.
In the 30s, Jewish?
No, Catholic, very devout. Of course, I'm not religious at all myself.
My dear boy, you don't have to excuse yourself to me. We're all liberals here. I have no prejudice against Catholics, not even lapsed Catholics. In fact, some of my best friends are lapsed Catholics.
But having Laurence Olivier playing Andrew Wyke must be fair competition for you. Is there a danger of being overshadowed by him?
I think there's always a danger of being overshadowed. The thing is, I suppose you just rely on the lighting man and hope he can light shadows. It's not something you worry about, and especially in a two-man piece. There must eventually come a time when you get your own sort of turn, and then it's very nice to have someone like Lord Olivier off camera. Roy, have you got the glasses, or have I got? I must have left them upstairs.
That's very spoken, my dear.
He was cast first and was asked who he would like to play the part, and he said me. I mean, I suppose presuming that I wouldn't overshadow him. Filipino.
The rest of the film, of course, was shot in the studio and in one very claustrophobic set.
Yeah.
Did that create problems?
It would have created problems. It could have created problems, I suppose, from personality point of view. Say Larry and I had hated each other or something like that. But we got on so well that everything was really very, very good for us. The only trouble was just it's a problem for a director to make a set interesting for that long. But I think, again, when you have someone with the experience of Mankiewicz and from, shall we say, the Hollywood school of movie making, which is exploring every angle of sets, because usually they didn't have too much to work with in the early days. He is from the Hollywood school of actor, which means that if you're Olivier, he can deal with you anyway. And if you're a dum-dum, he's dealt with so many in Hollywood, he can deal with you in that case as well. Because the old Hollywood directors, they let you come on the set and see how much you know. And if you happen not to know anything, they say you weren't supposed to anyway. And so you feel quite comfortable no matter what happens, even though possibly you're making $1 million a film.
Sleuth earned Caine his second Oscar nomination. But at the same time, he was developing a reputation for choosing roles with an eye on the paycheck rather than their quality. And there was talk of him leaving Britain and its high taxes to protect his hard-earned bank balance.
In fact, I'm surprised you're here tonight because one read in the paper recently that you're going to leave the country for good and abandon us.
Yeah, I read in the paper that I was going to leave the country for good. I've had lots of prizes. I read in the paper my house was for sale, and everybody was in a real estate, but no, it's not true.
The story was, in fact, that while you were in the States, that the new wealth tax was put forward, proposed, and that you said there's no way you're going to get me back to live in Britain if that happens.
No, I didn't even know about the wealth tax. I arrived in England 7:30 one morning, having flown for 11 hours, which is all night. I had my baby in my arms and 2 bags in the other, and a man said, "What would you do if they took all your money away?" So I said, "I'd leave the bloody country." "Wouldn't you?" And he said, "Yes." And he was a reporter. And the next day it said, "Michael Caine says he'll leave if there's a wealth tax." What do you say? I don't know. I might leave because of the papers, but not because of the wealth tax.
So, in fact, we can scotch that rumour, can't we? There's no way
that rumour is entirely scotched.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
How important is money to you?
Oh, terribly, yes. Oh, very important. It's important. I'll give you an idea of how important it is that when I was 24, I was very broke, very out of work, and my father died. And later, when I had money and I met people with money, I realized that if I did have had money at the time when he was sick, he would still be alive today. So anybody who suddenly says to me, money is not terribly important, comes the nearest they've ever been to strangulation, I tell you.
Yeah. But
it's terribly important to me.
Yes. I suppose the difficult thing about it, of course, is learning how to handle it in the sense of how not letting it dominate all your thinking.
Yes, well, that's the whole point. I think if you left the country because of tax, you would be dominated by outside forces.
Yeah.
Money is obviously important to everyone else. Otherwise, you wouldn't be trying to take it away from me either. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, my own view of say money in this country and taxes is I want to live here, so I pay the taxes, which, I suppose. If I ever thought about it, I suppose I'm a socialist, an emotional socialist, which I think is a liberal, they call it. I don't know. And my own view is that if you have a lot of money and you want to live somewhere where there are people who are less fortunate than you, then you should be taxed. If you don't like it, get out.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
And so my view is that I would rather be half as rich with people collecting tax than twice as rich in a country in which there are abysmally poor people.
Yes, but one just wishes, of course, with tax that you could actually see what they're taking from you going to the public good. I mean, going like to people who need it, like the pensioners and like schools and a better health service and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And if you could see that happen, then you wouldn't mind paying taxes.
It's rather extraordinary because they've taken this tax away from me and now they've subsidised my bread, which I think is... and my milk, so I'm getting it all back.
How important is it for you to leave your children some money? I mean, how much do you work in the sense that you provide security for them?
More or less just 50-50, in as much as my having money while I'm alive is important to bring up my children, and then I would like to leave money to them.
Yes.
I suppose you fall into certain traps here. You often see around discotheques some twit without a brain in his head who's inherited £20 million. You know what I mean? And you think to yourself, it doesn't seem fair. And then when it comes to you and you want to leave your children enough money for an education, someone said, but you said it didn't seem fair.
Yes, yes.
So the whole thing is kind of hypocritical anyway, but you hope nobody notices.
But you came from a very poor background, didn't you? And I wonder how it would have been for you, how much your life would have changed, how much less successful perhaps you might have been had your mum and dad saved up and put you through a posh school and things.
Well, I think if my parents had left me any money, I would have gone to a sort of voice lessons and elocution and all that sort of thing, and would have destroyed myself really, because the only thing that I have which is of any value whatsoever is, whether it's good, bad or indifferent, is it's a unique thing, is I talk the way I do and no one else talks quite the same. Whereas if I went and everyone sort of sat down and talked like that, it wouldn't quite be the same thing, And they don't write those French window plays anymore anyway.
Are you in fact in any way a temperamental star? Do you get temperamental when you...
No, that's one of my great things. I try to be temperamental and it doesn't work. Everyone laughs. Because I notice all the temperamental stars, people say, don't call him too early, don't call him too early. Call Mike, he's easy. Don't call him Bill. Because directly you throw a temperament, everybody's scared of you. They say, watch it with him, watch it with him. And then they say, Mike Caine's on the picture. They say, don't worry about him. And so they never worry about you. They leave it. They go to lunch and leave you in the caravan. And things like that. So sometimes I do a little temperamental act just to let everybody know I'm in the caravan at lunchtime.
You're still around.
Yeah.
Are there in fact any people that you won't work with, though?
No, I've never met anybody I wouldn't work with.
Really?
No, I suppose there are some people I could think of.
I just wondered if you you had this long apprenticeship when you're coming through and you're a nobody, and I wondered if there were anybody along the way who'd done you a disservice.
Oh yeah, there are a couple who I wouldn't work with, but their names escape me, so it's really there's no point in me trying to remember. When you're very, very young, and you're a young actor, stars can sometimes be very unkind, you know. I've never really been on the real receiving end of that, but I've noticed them being very standoffish. And of course, I go in the other direction and make an absolute fool of myself, you know.
Yes.
And have some small part actor say, don't bother me now, I'm learning my line. That's what happened. It's the old story, you know, who's the guy with Frank Sinatra?
That's right. Yeah. Do you ever get also in personal life, not now acting, but do you ever get a feeling of inferiority when you talked about your voice, when you hear an immaculate accent, a cut-glass accent, and you see a guy with sort of real poise and style and this sort of thing?
No, no, I never do, because I'm my true self, but I can also play him. You see what I mean? If someone said to me, do a cut-glass accent with poise, well, I did it in the very first film I ever did. I did Zulu.
Zulu, that's right.
And so in any case, those things are indicative of kind of class, which has never really mattered to me. They never really counted for me. I mean, it's mattered, but...
Well, it mattered in the sense that I would imagine that very much it was a driving force behind you, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, sure, because what used to happen is I always had the feeling that there were all these guys with cut-glass accents getting their apprenticeship playing Cockney newspaper boys and all that, you know, saying, yes, gov, you know, and all that, with poise.
With poise, yeah.
Yes. That's why I came into the business. I thought we've got to give it a little bit of the gutter.
Are you in fact at all in awe of stage actors, you know, the great stage actors who you've worked with? I mean, for instance, Olivier, you did Sleuth with.
Yeah, I was in awe when I was told I was going to work with him, but then when you get there, you realise that he has the same problems as you, so there's no time to be in awe of anything. Do you know the story about John Wayne? And John Wayne was in the scene, and the director said to him, you go over the ridge and you see thousands of Indians, right? And you just look at them, you know, and you're stunned. And so he goes over the ridge and he looks at them, and nothing happened. So the director said, cut, listen to me. He said, look, Dirk, he said, listen. He said, when you see him, you're in awe. Awe. So John Wayne goes up to the edge of the ridge, he goes, oh, look at all those things. You said awe, so I thought of that.
1977 saw the release of another Caine classic, The Eagle Has Landed. It prompted another tour of talk shows, including an appearance on Saturday Night at the Mill, where Caine spoke in detail about his first break in Zulu.
Stanley Baker played a very important role, didn't he, in launching you?
Yeah, Stanley was the lead in A Hill in Korea, and although I fouled up all these things in the picture, he kind of kept an eye on me, and 10 years later, when he became a producer himself, he sent for me to play in Zulu and to play the Cockney part, which was obvious. And the director was an American, and I went there and he said, I'm terribly sorry, James Booth, who is a marvellous actor, has got the part. So I thought, well, there's no way I can beat him out of the part. So he says, got it, forget it. And I was just walking out, and at that time I was very skinny, having not eaten for 10 years. and the American director, who was a man named Seinfeld, said, listen, he said, can you speak any differently from that awful voice that you have? So I said, yeah. I said, I can do anything. Just put the money up. I'll speak any way you want me to. So he said, because you don't look like a Cockney to me, you know, which means, again, we have the stereotype. It's got to be a short guy saying, yes, gov, it's a fair cop and all that with a striped pullover and a mask.
And a cheeky sparrow.
And always a cheeky, chirpy sparrow, salt of the earth, good in a tight situation, you know. And so he said, will you wait and for Stanley to come, and you can play Lieutenant Bromhead if you can speak properly. So I said, well, can I go into gents? And I shut myself to gents and starting to speak properly. Talked terribly like that. It was all saying hello, and anyone who came into the gents at the same time must have thought I was sort of saying, good evening, and how are you? And all this. I thought I had someone in there. Anyway, I came out, and I did a reading with Stanley, so they said, we'll give you a test. They gave me a test, and the next day I saw Cy Enfield, and he said, Michael, that was the worst movie test I've ever seen. So I said, okay, Cy, fair enough. He said, but we're strapped, you've got the part. We can't find anybody else. So I got it. What he meant was you couldn't find anybody else who'd work as cheap as I would.
But movies are about moments or entrances. You know, one thinks of Omar Sharif coming out of the Mirage on the camel's back and Lawrence of Arabia and so on. And he's coming to our program shortly. You had a marvellous moment like that, your entry into Zulu on the horse's back. I mean, great.
Yeah, I came in very slowly on a horse across a waterfall, and what they didn't tell me, it was a Basuto. We shot it in South Africa, northern South Africa, in Zululand, and they told me, they didn't tell me it was a Basuto pony. And as we got up in this great entrance into the cinema, the horse saw something glint for the first time in its life, which was the sun on the camera, which was 1,000 glints. And of course, as I was going across a waterfall, it just leapt off the side with me on it. And the guy who came in actual fact, the very first shot of me in Zulu was the prop man with my hat and cloak on in the distance. Because I couldn't get up off the floor. And I remember the assistant saying, quick, the sun's going, screw him, leave him where he is. Get his cloak and hat and get on the goddamn horse, and that's what they did.
So it's an even better entrance than I thought it was.
Movies are a very sentimental business. And I remember I walked back to the set and they were on to something else, because the minute they finish with your movie, they don't give a damn. They were on to shooting something else, and I stormed in the middle of the set. I said, that's it. And I slung my sword and everything down, which had gone all over me, up everywhere when I fell over. Slung the sword down. I said, never again will I do a stunt or anything in movies. I said, if it's to step off a thick carpet, you get someone else. I said, because if that's how you treat people when, and blah, blah, blah. And to this day, well, I've done a few stunts, but they're all kind of stupid things for actors to do.
Looking now to you know, the future career of Michael Caine, for a while you had a reputation as a hellraiser, inverted commas, hellraiser, and you were lumbered with the Alfie image for a long, long time. Did that annoy you?
No, well, not really. It was all rather a phony thing, in as much as I think at that time I was the only unmarried English actor around who was, shall we say, interested in the opposite sex. And so I was the only target for all that. But I mean, I was a bachelor and a bad cook, so I went out in the evenings, and that after a while became known as hellraising. Yeah. It seemed very funny, you know. I was doing what every other guy used to do, and I got this terrible reputation, and a song written by Burt Bacharach.
What's it all about?
Yeah, what's it all about? I never found out.
There could hardly be a bigger contrast to your persona now. Very much the family man, with your hell-raising days long, long ago.
Oh, sure. I'm very happily married. I don't ever think I was a kind of bachelor. I always think I was an unmarried man. I grew up in a very happy family, and I think I've always looked to repeat that. And I must say, I certainly have now.
I have it on the best of authority that when Peter Sellers gave that impression of you, saying that when a man falls from the top...
Not many people.
You actually do that, don't you?
Yeah, I have what is called a photographic memory. So when I read something, I remember it all. Most people remember the important bits. I remember the trivia, the junk, everything. I got a mind full of trash, you know. And so whenever I'm having dinner or I have one or two too many drinks and someone says something, I'll say, do you know, blah, 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 you know, like the thing about the carbon dioxide and
Could I put you on the spot and, tell the ladies and gentlemen, do you know?
The first flight of the Kitty Hawk, which was the first flight of an airplane, which was invented by the Wright brothers, was actually shorter and lower than the height and length of a Boeing 747.
Now, not many people know that.
Despite that earlier pledge to remain in Britain, in 1979 high taxes did send Caine to live in America. The move coincided with a series of box office disappointments, like The Swarm and Ashanti. Yet despite them, Caine's star status remained unaffected. And in 1982, he was on the Parkinson Show to talk about his career and life in the USA.
In America, like, everybody says, how are you, Mike, and all this. In England, people say, how are you? And sometimes you get funny characters. I remember once I was walking along Shaftesbury Avenue when I first met my wife, and I was taking her out on the first date before we were married. And we were walking along Shaftesbury Avenue, and suddenly there was a bloke who stopped me and said, "You're Michael Caine," he said. I said, "I know." So he said, Christ, he said, "I'm your greatest fan." He said, "Look, I never expected to, to see you. It's fantastic." He said, I've seen everything you've ever done. He said, "I love you." He said, I think you're smashing." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, I'm taking my young lady to dinner." So he said, "Can I come?" so I said to him, "No, I said, I'm taking the girl to dinner, you know what I mean? On our own." He said, "No, can I come with you?" He said, "I'm your greatest fan." So I said, "Well, quite frankly, no. I don't mind how big a fan you are, and I'm very grateful, but I'm taking my young lady to dinner, and we want to be on our own." He said, "You conceited git." And suddenly there was this madman. He said, "Who do you think you are?" He said, "I've paid money to see you, and you have money at a bloody dinner with me." And suddenly there's a crowd around us. And everyone's recognised me, and there's this poor boy. He said, "Have you seen what he's done?" And everyone's saying to me, "You. What is it with you film stars? Who do you think you are? You walk over here, you think you can roll over everybody." And suddenly, I'm a villain in the middle of the street, having been stopped by this great fan. So when anybody says to me, "I'm your greatest fan," I go, "How great a fan are you?"
That's right.
And how long are you going to be it?
Of course, you've taken a lot of stick, haven't you, for going out to live in America. I mean, I can never understand why people should object to people making a choice about where they live.
Yeah.
Why do you think this is?
I don't know. I think it sells newspapers, That's what it does.
You think it's a journalistic thing
It's
rather
a journalistic
than a public
thing rather than a public thing. I think a majority of the public in my position of having earned the money I earned and being told by my accountant that I would die broke if I stayed here would have gone, plus the fact that the industry left. The British movie industry went, and is only just beginning to come back now with some wonderful films, which is great. But, you can't keep up stakes and going backwards and forwards, and so I've come back here to make a movie without moving back.
But you're very British, aren't you? You're a very English person.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
But don't you feel immensely nostalgic when you get back here?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, the main point to remember is that I would never have left here unless the industry had gone. It wasn't basically the tax, it was the industry had gone. And I miss it like hell, but I have to think of a future, because how long do actors have as earning power,
The film that Caine had returned to make was Educating Rita, which won both Caine and his co-star Julie Walters BAFTA Awards for the Best Actor and Actress. It was one of his own personal favourites, as he would tell Barry Norman a few years later in 1986.
You look back over your career, are there any films in particular that you can look at and say, yeah, they were good and I was good in them?
Yeah, Man Who Would Be King, Sleuth, Alfie, Educating Rita, Zulu, Get Carter. Funnily enough, a film which was a dog, which is The Last Valley. I liked that performance. I think the nearest I came really was, as good as I've ever been, would have been Honorary Consul and Educating Rita, which funnily enough were in the same year.
There is more poetry in the telephone directory, and probably more insight. However, this has one advantage over the telephone directory. It is easier to rip. It is pretentious, characterless, and without style.
It's not.
Oh, I don't expect you to believe me. I mean, you recognize the hallmark of literature now, don't you? Why don't you just go away? I don't think I can bear it any longer.
Oh. Can't bear what, Frank?
You, my dear. You.
Out of those 60 films, I think you'll agree, there have been quite a few turkeys. Did you know before you went into them that some of them were going to stay frogs and not become princes?
No, you don't, because what happens is yesterday's turkey is today's prince. I'll give you, for instance, something like The Man Who Would Be King that came out and went flat on its face and is now a big cult movie in America and has sold several $1 million worth of video cassettes.
Yeah, but I mean, if you take, you know, The Man Who Would Be King, I thought was a very good film, but you can never at any time surely have thought that The Swarm was going to be good or A Shanty was going to be good.
Well, no, you don't think they're going to be good, but you think they might be popular. Those things paid for certain things. I mean, that was when I first went to America. And, I mean, I just took any job that came along and they offered me a lot of money for it.
Do you think if you'd stayed here in Britain, you'd be in the position you are in today?
No, not at all. It's completely due to the United States, of being there and of being known there.
So then, now that things are looking up in the industry here, is there a chance of re-importing people like you?
Yeah, I'm really basically re-importing myself. Well, when I was in Los Angeles, I looked at like, say, for instance, I've been nominated for the Oscar 3 times. And I looked at what were those pictures, what was the source of those pictures. And the source of those pictures, which were Alfie, Sleuth, and Educating Rita, was West End plays. And I mean, it's three of the most... And because the shrewdness of the producers who made those pictures was that they knew they had a wider appeal than just England, you know, sort of basic little British picture, but they were just really little British pictures. I mean, Alfie cost under $1 million, you know, so I figured if you can come back and find the right writing with the right theme, it doesn't matter where you make the picture.
1986 also saw Caine scoring his next major success when his role in Woody Allen's Hannah and Her Sisters won him the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. The year also saw him decide to return to live in Britain, as he would explain in this appearance on The Wogan Show.
Now, since Educating Rita, you're almost a one-man movie industry. You made 5 films in 1 year.
Well, it seems like that, actually. I made the picture, Hannah and Her Sisters, with Woody Allen in 1984. But Woody works in a certain way. You get a contract, and he said, in the contract it says, will you come back at your own convenience for 5 days later if he wants to reshoot stuff. So he hangs on and on to the film. He never released it till the beginning of 1986, I think.
Yeah, you've had terrific reviews for it in the States, haven't you?
Yeah, well, you know, in the States they don't understand what I'm saying, so I get good reviews for everything.
So you spent all your time in L.A. without anybody understanding a blind word?
No, they do, because in America... When you go to America, you think, well, maybe people say to me, well, you've got a Cockney accent, how are they going to understand you? And it's not the accent at all, because they have accents, you know, everybody over there. I mean, think of Henry Kissinger, a great American, the way he talks like that all the time. And everybody has an accent, but what it is British people talk about twice the speed of Americans, and they can't understand them. I mean, I remember I was watching, I've been in America, I hadn't left America for about 7 months, and I was watching an English show one afternoon, and it was about one of these sort of very upper crust things with French windows, and everybody saying Bunty's having a party in tennis shorts. and I was sitting there, and everybody seemed to be going, oh, and I thought to myself, I better go back to England because I don't know what the hell these people are talking about. And it's true. I mean, there was a sort of... And you really couldn't... I was trying to lip read, but of course their lips don't move. British people talk without moving their lips. The Duke of Norfolk used to do that. He always talked like that.
It's a stiff upper lip,
It's a stiff upper lip, yes, and he could talk without actually moving his lips. Yes.
This is where we get a nation of ventriloquists from.
That's it, we do. Yeah.
But you're not lost to the British. Are you coming home for good now?
Yes, I ran out of clean shirts.
I hope I'm coming home for good. I don't know what else I'm coming home for.
Yeah.
No, I decided that I wanted to come home and talk to people about the weather, because you can't talk about the weather in Los Angeles.
It's always the same.
You open the curtains and the sun's shining. Or if you talk to a Los Angelian about the weather, he'd think you were nuts, because there's nothing to say. The sun shines. You can't see it for the smoke, but the sun is there. You know it, you know.
Yeah, but you're coming back here now. I mean, won't you miss all the outdoor activities? All that bracing, swimming and tennis and all that vigorous stuff that you got?
No, I built all that indoors.
Here?
Yeah. You can't build a swimming pool outdoors here. When I had a house here before, I had a swimming pool outdoors, and I think I swam in it 3 times and caught pneumonia twice. You can't. I built an indoor swimming pool.
Will you miss anything about America, living there?
No, not really, because I go back all the time. I have a lot of American friends. I always remember I got terrible trouble. I was in a country which will be nameless, and one of their top reporters in their paper said to me, he said, what is the one thing that you shouldn't miss here? And I said, the plane. I nearly got lynched.
Yeah, some countries are very sensitive, and the Australians, for instance, always want you to say you love the place, don't they?
I've never been to Australia, but I've said I've loved the place to Australians in Earl's Court when I was younger.
Yeah.
Because they're usually about a foot taller than you are.
Right.
So anyway, said, do you like Australia? I said, love it, great.
How are you going to feel about changing to, adjusting to a rural village where you're going to live next June?
Well, I've already adjusted
and
to
what
it.
the neighbours think of having a
I know everybody. I know practically everybody in the village. They don't see me as anything like that, you see, because I sort of cycle up and down with my daughter Natasha, and the way they do, they cycle up. I've always got old clothes on. I'm extremely unostentatious. I don't drive some great Rolls or anything. I've read the lesson in church at Christmas, and the vicar told me that was the biggest box office I'd ever had.
You offered a lot of scripts now, I suppose, in every post.
Yes, I am offered a lot of scripts, but very few of them are worth doing. I mean, I get scripts that I send back to producers and say, not only will I not do this, I suggest you don't do it, because you're going to lose your shirt on this one. You know, and I mean, even then, you know, I've made some dumb pictures, but usually because the locations were good.
Well, that's what it's going to, always for the right reasons.
Yeah. If the script starts off and it says our hero, whoever I'm playing, walks onto the deck of the yacht as it pulls into Saint-Tropez, I say, I'll do it. Never forget. And if it says he comes screaming out of a blizzard in the South Pole, I say, forget it.
Well, I think that's the way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, I did a picture last year, Sweet Liberty with Alan Alda. That's how it's been in America, but they said to me, Alan Alda said, I've written this for you. So I said, oh, really? I said, what's the part? He said, a conceited old film star. So I said, where are you going to do it? He said, in the Hamptons in Long Island, you know, which is a great place. He said, and we've got your house on the beach in June and July, which is a great time to be there. So he said, you want to do it? I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I did it. And I had a great time doing it. And I like to have my family with me. I'm complete family man. I like my family to go where I can go. So if I see a picture that takes place in Liberia or something in the jungle and it's about leprosy, you know, I say, forget it, I can't bring my daughter.
Yeah. And you're also choosy about who you work with as well, not because they have to be good actors, but...
Yeah, I mean, I try to work with people who I think will be nice, because so many of them are pain, you know, and I really... life is too short, you know, to work with people who you stand on a set and wait for, who have tantrums, go screaming about, and not many are like that, actually. Very few big stars are really conceited or pain in the neck. But some of the ones who are not so hot and think they are.
But do you come across method acting a lot? I mean, and people who are looking for motivation all the time.
Oh, you get all that, yeah. American actors especially are like that. You know, I remember Olivier was working with a very famous American star who was going into great paroxysms in the corner and running up and down and getting breathless before the scene. And Larry Olivier looked at him and he said, why don't you try acting? It's much easier.
That's your Dustin Hoffman story.
Yeah. But I wasn't going to mention this.
Of course you were.
I like Dustin, and I think he's a wonderfully talented man, but he did say that to Dustin. but Rod Steiger does that and all. He runs up and down. You know the way he talks at Rod? You know, oh, you're going to be... It's because he's run up and down the stage all the time.
But you're not coming back to England, to Britain, at a time when the British film industry is exactly healthy. I mean, David Putnam has left, Goldcrest is in trouble.
Can you name a time when the British film industry was in a good condition? I mean, we're better off. We got David out there. He can get American money for us because nobody else can. Yeah. I think it's a very good idea for David to go out there and do that job.
Would you ever think of putting your own money into a film or producing your own? I know you've directed one of your own.
Produced, yeah, but no, I wouldn't. I mean, I just co-produced the Fourth Protocol with Freddie Forsyth. But you don't put your own money in because the amounts are so massive. You know, I mean, the Fourth Protocol is cheap at $6.5 million. You know, I mean, for an individual to do that, I mean, it's ridiculous. You've got to cross-collateralize yourself with something else. So you have to be a bank. If you're going to put $6 million in a picture, you've got to have at least $100 million to save your neck.
Finally, you know the way Max Bygraves, when anybody impersonates him, he's supposed to have said, "I want to tell you a story."
Yeah.
Well, the famous one that Peter Sellers always attached to you was, "Not a lot of people know that."
Not a lot of people know that.
Did you ever actually say that?
I probably did once at dinner, and I'd never heard it, and I phoned Peter one day, and he had an answering machine. And the answering machine said, "Not a lot of people know this, but Peter Sellers is out at the moment, and he will call you when he comes back." And I listened to this voice. You never know what you... I was watching a television program once, and it was for cigars, and it was The Invisible Man, you know, the old Claude Rains character. You know, but he had on glasses. And I said to the guy, I said to my wife, I said, "There's the Invisible Man here," I said, "and it hasn't got a lovely voice like Claude Rains. And he's got glasses on, and he's got this terrible voice." And my wife said, "It's you." And they had an impersonator do my voice on it.
What a crust.
But I thought my voice was terrible. But it's been my fortune, because no one else talks like me.
Well, it's great to see you.
Great to see you, Terry.
It's Michael Caine.
Thank you.
Caine found himself expanding on those comments on acting technique in a BBC programme called Acting in Film, which saw him delivering a brilliant movie masterclass before a group of fellow actors.
We're going to talk for a little while about film acting, of which I've done a little bit. And the first thing that will happen to the audience is, of course, for the rest of the day, they will be completely ignored, because you don't exist. My fellow actors and I can regard you as the crew, right? And once you're in front of that camera, nobody exists. Nobody, except the other person in the scene. And what we do, we actors who are in the movie, we hang on to each other's eyes. That's the most important thing in film. Eyes, eyes. If you're fair and you've got blonde eyelashes like I have, you wear mascara, because if you have blonde eyelashes and you're in a movie, you might as well be in a radio play. With a close-up, which I've started with close-ups because they are eventually what sells you in a movie, because people see your eyes. And I'll take my glasses off. What you get in the cinema, my friends here watch the monitor. What I often see in television or a cinema is people who are looking at someone else and they change eyes. Can I have some? Come stand here, Simon. Do you stand off camera? Mm-hmm. And then I will look at you. Mm. Stand. Always remember, if you're doing a close-up with somebody, you are the off actor, the one who's off the set, get as close to the lens as possible to bring the other actor around to the most advantageous for him, which is right round to the lens. So you don't pan right, cameraman, because you'll hit something. Now, you see actors, and they're acting, and they change, and it's an infinitesimal thing in the eyes, is they change eyes as they're talking. Can you see my eyes changing there?
Yes.
Just I'm changing eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm blinking. Now that is two of the worst things to do. First of all, you never change eyes, and what you do is you pick an eye. Now which eye do you pick? I look at with this eye, because the camera is there, I look at this eye, at your eye there, which brings my face, you can see. If I look with this eye at that eye, look what you get. You see the difference? But it's the same look. And if I keep blinking, it weakens me. But if I'm talking to you and I don't blink and I just keep going and I don't blink and I keep on going and I don't blink, you start to listen to what I'm saying. And it makes me a very strong person as opposed to someone who is sitting there going, which is someone who's completely flustered. The camera is like somebody who loves you deeply. Is the most incredible of mistresses or lovers, whichever sex you are, because it will love you forever in spite of the fact that for the rest of your career, except on given occasions, which we will come to, you ignore it. It does not exist. You never look into it, you never know it's there. You just hold the eyes of the other person and listen. And listening is really what acting is all about for movies. It's not like the theatre. It's an entirely different situation. But also, when you get really close to the camera, if some directors go in for a massive close-up, the thing that people never do in real life is they don't say, oh, I don't want to go out, I'll have the egg and chips, you know. But you will see actors doing that all the time. And so when you get in here, that doesn't look so obvious until you get in here, you know. So, but you've got to just be. There is no one here. It's just you and me. You'll be standing there. And there isn't even a camera. And you just say, well, no, I don't think I'll have the egg and chips. I'll have the caviar and blinis. Shall I? And they say, well, no, what do you really want? And you say, well, he's not doing anything. And it's a story of Jack Lemmon, who was working with George Cukor. It was his first movie, and he'd come from Broadway, theatre, and he kept doing it, a scene. George would say, cut, less, Jack, less. Jack would do it again. George, cut, less, less. Again, cut, less. And Jack finally said, look, if I do any less, I'll be doing nothing. And George said, now you've got it. But there is a sort of feeling that you have to get. Just stand up. It's a feeling that you have to get. It's just the two of us talking to each other. Yeah. You understand what I mean? Yeah. And the moment I'm saying it's just the two of us talking to each other, I know I'm doing it for all these people out here. Yeah. And I've even said to a director, he said, I didn't see that, Michael. I didn't see that on that take. And I said, where were you sitting? He said, there. I said, how are you going to see it? The lens is here. You know? And so what you're doing, and the test for this is like, supposing you were rehearsing a scene. So I'm standing here talking to you, and we're rehearsing a scene, and the director comes up, or assistant director or someone, will come up and say, oh, I'm sorry, I see you're rehearsing, and he goes away. If he can see that we are rehearsing, then we're not doing it right. What should happen is we should be talking just to each other. Yeah. And the director, the assistant or the friend or other actor should come up and join in the conversation as though it's a real conversation. And you say, we're rehearsing. And they say, oh, I didn't realise.
Throughout the 80s and 90s, Caine would go on to bigger and bigger success, winning a Golden Globe for Little Voice and another Oscar for The Cider House Rules. and widespread acclaim for The Quiet American. He was made Sir Michael Caine in 2000, and a whole new audience would come to recognise Alfie as Alfred, butler to Bruce Wayne in the blockbuster Dark Knight trilogy. One final fitting fact to end on, that Michael Caine himself only discovered recently. M. Caine is an anagram of cinema. Now, not a lot of people know that.
Well, what I know is we've two of his best films to come, starting with the Ipcress File. That's next.